Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, how big of a challenge will it be for the Raiders to go to South Beach and take on the Dolphins in Week 11? We'll find out on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Crossover Thursday, November 16th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. Of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the daily efforts of my guy, Ari. He does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, we're sounding good, we're doing what we're supposed to do, and it's all because of my guy, Ari. So definitely shout out to Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can also check me out on Twitter at your boy Q254, and normally, we've got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. No calls or texts today. It is all crossover edition. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins, will join the show. We'll talk all things storylines, all things matchups. We'll even give you a path to victory for both teams, the Dolphins and the Raiders, and a score prediction. I'm not a big fan of score predictions, but we'll do it anytime that the other host wants to do it. I'll go ahead and roll with it, even though, like I said, not a big fan, not very good at it, but we'll do it anyway. I do have a couple little news and notes, a few little nuggets I like to call them, that we'll get to before we get into the crossover edition. And before we do any of that, I want to let you know today's crossover episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The first piece of news and notes I have for you for segment number one is Robert Spillane, AFC Defensive Player of the Week, is something that interim head coach Antonio Pierce actually let us know early on Wednesday in the Intermountain Health Performance Center when we were meeting with him. He was talking about Robert Spillane. He said, oh, by the way, AFC Defensive Player of the Week, Robert Spillane. And in Week 10, he tied for the team lead with 7 tackles, had a sack, a tackle for loss, a pass defense, and an interception. He iced the game in the fourth quarter, becoming the first Raider defender since 2016 to record a sack and an interception in a single game. Also earns his first AFC Defensive Player of the Week award and the second for the Raiders this season, only behind Max Crosby in Week 5. Spillane is also the first Raiders linebacker to win the award since 2016. Bruce Irvin did it in Week 15. And also what he earned was the best parking spot in the parking lot there at the Raiders practice facility, something that when we were walking in from the practice field, we happened to see it. It was the very first parking stall. It used to be the one that John Gruden parked his car in all the time. Instead, that's now reserved for the Raider of the Week. And with Robert Spillane winning AFC Defensive Player of the Week, he wins the Raider of the Week award. And so it actually is a nice, shiny little name tag on the parking spot. If you follow me on Twitter at your boy Q254, I took a picture of it and tweeted it out. You can check it out. Nice and shiny. It has his name, Robert Spillane, Raider Player of the Game on it. So for the week, he gets that parking spot, and I think that's pretty cool. Just another little addition that Antonio Pierce and company are doing to try to make the players feel comfortable and also make the players feel respected and wanted and just a little bit looser. I know A.J. Cole actually won that spot last week, but they didn't have the name tags, the plaques in place yet, so he didn't get his name on a plaque, but Robert Spillane did get his on Wednesday. Also want to let you know that the Raiders, they designated for a return from the reserve injured list safety Roderick Teamer. He's been out for a while. Now they have 21 days to actually activate him to the active roster. If not, then he basically goes on IR. But they did do that on Wednesday as well. Designated him for return from the reserve injured list. Of course, he's a key special teams guy, and sometimes he gets in there on defense. Now, I don't have time to go over the whole injury report from Wednesday. Of course, we'll get another one today. We'll get another one on Friday, and then 90 minutes before kickoff on Sunday, we'll find out who's inactive and who's not inactive. But I did want to pass along the guys that did not participate in practice for the Raiders on Wednesday. Linebacker Curtis Bolton dealing with the illness. Tackle Colton Miller still with the shoulder injury. Of course, he missed the game against the Jets on Sunday. Guard Dylan Parham dealing with the calf injury. That could be a big deal. That's the whole left side of the Raiders offensive line. And then cornerback and Meek Robertson with the concussion. He left the game on Sunday with that concussion. He's in protocol, even though he did tweet out late on Wednesday night, God is great, which he is. So he could have been simply just putting that out, or maybe he's saying that he's getting better, or even he cleared concussion protocol. We'll find out sooner rather than later. If not today, we'll find out on Friday when we talk to interim head coach Antonio Pierce. So those are the news and notes that I have for you for segment number 1. Now it's time to jump into part 1 of the crossover edition. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins, and me talking all things Raiders, all things Dolphins, and starting off talking about the biggest storylines between the two teams. Here it is. Check it out.
Thank you. These Raiders, man, they're sneaking up on people a little bit. 5-5, got a couple of wins. Antonio Pierce, what's the buzz down over in Las Vegas? And out of all of the things that could possibly be the main storyline right now, what stands out to you?
Well, it's just that guy, Antonio Pierce, and the way that he's brought a newfound energy to this organization, a newfound energy to this fan base, right? I mean, this team, the players in the locker room. We were in the locker room on Wednesday, and they're playing basketball. They're having a good time, right? They're playing cornhole. They're relaxed. They're chilling, right? And they have that newfound energy and that belief that they can go out there and win against anybody. And look, they've played 2 games at home. And that's probably the best time for an interim coach to come in, right, is when you have 2 games at home against 2 very winnable teams, against the Giants and the Jets. They won both of those. So the sky is great. Everything is good. Well, now it gets real, right? You step up to the big leagues this week as you take your show on the road to Miami. So we'll learn a lot about this team. But I just think the storyline is, the newfound energy and belief that this team and this fan base has with Antonio Pierce as the interim head coach, and the fact that the team is having fun again, as opposed to what they were doing under Josh McDaniels, which was clearly not a lot of fun at all. So I'm assuming that the storyline for the Dolphins has something to do with the fact that they haven't beat a bunch of teams that are above 500. I'm sure that's something that they're tired of hearing about.
Yeah, and we're close this week playing a team that's 5-5, and
Right.
if you win, you beat a team that's now below 500. And if you lose, then you can't beat another team that's above 500. So it's the perfect tee up for
Right.
that storyline to continue for yet another week for the Dolphins. But yeah, I think this team coming off the bye, getting a chance to get healthy, their defense has what the entire projected starting unit was going to look like at the beginning of the year. That is all together. They really only got that against Kansas City for the first time all season. They're a little banged up on the offensive line, both their guard spots, but they did get Teron Armstead back and Connor Williams back for against the Chiefs before the bye. So the Dolphins are coming out of this bye week about as healthy as they have been all season. And that for Miami, I think, is what the storyline is what's the ceiling of the football team? Because for being 6-3 and having an ugly loss against Buffalo in week 4 on your schedule, and losing by 2 touchdowns to the Eagles thanks to a late touchdown in week 7, and losing to the Chiefs and not being able to execute at the end of the game, like, even in a lot of their wins, there have been these self-inflicted wounds on both sides of the ball, and some of it is guys that have been elevated and had to play because of injuries. Some of it is because of what you would explain as the new defensive system, learning or growing pains that we saw in the first portion of the season. That defense is stabilized, but it's like, okay, you got your guys now.
Yeah.
You're going to play this game, and you're missing both starting guards potentially. Robert Hunt may play. It doesn't sound promising, but in the grand scheme of things, everybody you hoped that you would have, Devon Achane's practice window open, he's probably going to be back for this game. How healthy can you stay? Can you do the thing that you're supposed to do and do the thing that, people criticize you for, which is beat teams you have better records than? And if you do, the next 5-game stretch for Miami is going to be about putting a stranglehold on this AFC East. And I'm really fascinated to see how this young team handles that now that everybody's healthy, because Mike McDaniel has talked a lot about this being a young football team in the past, and their ability to put the proper lens through opportunities and games last year specifically was something that, you got the impression that they felt they weren't always properly focused for the game or the task at hand. And you're coming out of the bye, you're 6-3, you got a better record than the Raiders. What do you do with that? I think that's the storyline for Miami.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and another storyline that, we're obviously paying attention to here a lot when it comes to the Raiders is, you've had two successful weeks against teams that weren't very good, and the Giants and the Jets, even though the Jets have a really good defense. So are they really a better team? Are they really, clicking on all cylinders? And is the defense really playing as well as played? I mean, they didn't allow a touchdown last week. They haven't allowed a touchdown in a long time, right? I mean, it's like, I think it's been 30-something drives. It feels like they haven't scored a touchdown or hasn't had a touchdown scored against them. So can they keep that going against a team that has a high-octane offense, right? I mean, I know Miami's going to score. I have no doubt about that. But, can the Raiders eliminate some of those big plays? Can they, hold them to a field goal a few times as opposed to letting them get touchdowns every time? I mean, that's going to be, the big test for this team. What does it really look like? So I've been saying that this is a step up kind of in weight class. It's like when you go up from, you're a welterweight, then all of a sudden you're going to be in the heavyweight. Like, this is a heavyweight fight that they're going to step into. Do they have the punches to hang with the Dolphins, or is this going to be something that looks like maybe the Bills game that the Raiders were in week 2 where they just got slaughtered, right? I mean, so how real is this team? We'll learn a lot about them come Sunday when they're taking on the Dolphins. That's another storyline to definitely pay attention to when it comes to the Raiders.
And the last storyline that I would point to is Max Crosby and the Dolphins' answers for him.
Yeah.
Where we'll talk about matchups specifically, but one of the big focuses this offseason for Miami was keeping Tua Tagovailoa healthy and upright and avoiding taking sacks, and they have done a good job of doing that. He has had games where he's had a clean sheet pitched by his offensive line. He's going to have both his tackles for this game between Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson. What are their answers, and what do they trust the other guys to do from one-on-one matchups? I think that's a really key piece of this for Miami, because this offense goes so often as Tua Tagovailoa is able to get into a rhythm, and because of their play calling and their system, they have done a really good job of keeping pass rushers just off balance enough, whether they're moving the launch point or they're putting run action in your face and forcing you to transition and flip the switch into a pass rusher. What do the Dolphins choose to do to scheme up against Max Crosby, who's one of the best defensive players and best pass rushers in this league, to help make sure that he does not ruin the game plan, because he is good enough to do it? And I think that's a perfect setup for us to talk about key matchups in this crossover Thursday episode on the Locked On Network between Las Vegas Raiders and Miami Dolphins.
So there's part 1 of the crossover edition. Kyle Krabs and myself talking all things storylines between the Dolphins and the Raiders. Coming up in segment number 2, we're going to talk about the biggest matchups. What are we looking at? What are we going to be looking for in this game come Sunday in South Beach? Dolphins and Raiders. We'll jump right into part 2 of our conversation after I tell you about DoorDash. And if you get like me and you're super busy and you're stuck at the house, or maybe you're stuck at the job all day long and you just can't get something to eat, DoorDash is the way to go. I've been telling people about this a lot. I wasn't a DoorDash guy. Matter of fact, I just wasn't one of those guys that had it even on my phone. The wife did. And whenever I got into a pinch or got into a pickle and I needed some food, she would DoorDash something to me. Well, now she's convinced me to put DoorDash on my own phone. So now I downloaded the DoorDash app. And the good thing about that, if you do it just like I do it, you can get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and use the promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. So that's what I did. And, of course, the first time I did it, I messed it up because, well, I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. So the wife had to walk me through it. Hey, this is how you DoorDash, and it's real simple. Cool. Now I got it. Now if I want Grimaldi's, boom, I can get it. If I want Pizza Rock, I can get it. If I want Smith's, if I want something from the grocery store, I can get it. Chick-fil-A, whatever the case may be, everything that's local around me, I can get. And I can support the community at the same time, and conveniently, it comes to the house. Studio Q is what I like to call it. But you can do it from work. You can do it from wherever you're at. You can get anything DoorDash, pizza, wings, sodas, burgers, whatever the case may be. DoorDash has it all delivered without missing any action that you might want to see if you're checking out a game or, like I said, if you're at work. Again, if you're like me and you're living in the dark times and you haven't downloaded the DoorDash app, you need to do it right now. You can get 50% off, $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and use the promo code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply. Don't forget, use promo code LOCK23 for 50% off with the $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change. Terms apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Crossover Thursday. Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins, and myself, we talk all things Week 11 action. Segment number 1, we talk about the biggest storylines. Now it's time to get into the biggest matchups. So here it is, part 2 of the conversation between Kyle Krabs and myself, talking the biggest matchups with the Raiders and the Dolphins.
Okay, Q. We're talking matchups to watch in this. And I want to give you the opportunity to tackle one first. I kind of teed up Max Crosby a little bit, but would love to hear if your brain goes somewhere else when you think about this game, or if that is the hallmark one for you too.
I mean, that's always going to be one, right? Max Crosby versus any team's offensive line. And, you know, he's been moving around a lot this year. So, you know, it's not really one specific tackle or whatnot. But in this matchup in particular, I'm going to kind of go in a different direction. I think that Max Crosby is going to have an opportunity to do Max Crosby type things just because that's who he is. And special players make special plays. That's just the nature of the beast. I'm really looking at the Raiders defensive line as a unit going up against the Dolphins and their run game, especially if Achane is back like he expected to be back, and he's such a dominant runner. I mean, I ain't got to tell you, but they are really struggling when it comes to stopping the run. They struggled against the Giants. Saquon Barkley was having a nice game until the game got out of control and they had to go away from the run game. The Jets, they didn't do it quite so much, but Zach Wilson had 54 yards rushing, and, you know, the Jets ended up going over 100 yards. The Dolphins are going to want to butter their bread by way of the ground game, right? I know everyone looks at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua throwing the ball deep and everything, but I feel like everything is built off of those cats in the backfield. The run game really gets everything going. I think the Raiders have to have a big emphasis on making sure you slow down the run. I don't think you can stop the run completely. I just don't believe that. I think they have to have a huge emphasis on trying to slow down the run. Tyreek will probably get his. Raiders are very familiar with what he was able to do. Saw him all the time in Kansas City, so know what that guy's capable of. But if that's the only guy that's really going off, I feel like the Raiders have a puncher's chance in the game. But if the run game's clicking, Tyreek's clicking, Waddle's clicking, this guy's clicking, right, then everyone's having a good time and everyone's celebrating on the sideline. I think that they've got to make sure that they somewhat pick their poison, and trying to slow down the run as much as possible, I think, is a recipe for success for the Silver and Black. Again, very tough game. I mean, Miami is fantastic. You know that, but I just think that they've got to really have an emphasis on trying to slow down the run. So that defensive line against the run game of the Dolphins is what I'm really keying in on in this one. What about you?
Yeah, I'll stick with that same theme, and I'm looking at those two players on the second level for the Raiders too, between Robert Spillane and Devon Diablo, who had a lot of tackle numbers, and a lot of this defensive or offensive success is Mike McDaniel with the misdirection and the pulling offensive linemen and the motion, all of that crossing the center at and after the snap. It's a lot of eye candy. It's a lot of forcing you to hold for an extra step. And if it's with the speed in the backfield and you have to hold the extra step, you're buying that guard enough leverage to get up and cut you off and be able to get up onto the second level and create a chunk gain and an explosive gain. So I know, Spillane has just been outstanding this year for the Raiders. And obviously not just the game against the Jets where he had the interception and all of the big time numbers, but he's been a revelation since he's come over from Pittsburgh and played really well. He's going to have to keep that going, because as much as it is winning at the first line of scrimmage too, especially with this Dolphins defense, I think it's just as much on the responsibility of the Raiders and their linebackers to anticipate the flow of the ball and not allow the eye candy to really kind of screw with your reads and keys and your spacing as you fit the box.
Yeah, there's no doubt that eye candy is for real, right? I mean, window dressing, magic tricks in the backfield, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of it going on in Miami. It's something that it always makes me laugh when I watch the game, because I understand how it just throws everyone off. It throws defenders off. And if you're not disciplined, and Coach Antonio Pierce has talked about that. He said they've got a lot of magic tricks. They've got a lot going on in the backfield, but you've got to stay disciplined, as you mentioned, keep with your keys. So that will definitely be a big focus. The defense has got their work cut out for them. There is no doubt about it. The Raiders have not been averaging a lot of points per game, right? I mean, they just haven't. They've only gone over 20 points offensively once this game or this season, and that was against the Giants the first week that Antonio Pierce took over as the interim head coach. The Giants aren't a very good team, so take that for what it's worth. The defense is really going to have their work cut out for them. They've done some good jobs this season, I thought. They've really given the Raiders opportunities to win games. This will be a huge test for the, like you said, defensive line and clearly the linebackers as well. trying to slow down the run game and also, like I said, try to eliminate those magic tricks and not let them play those tricks on your mind as they're lining up and getting ready to run plays.
Yeah, and when I think about the other side of the ball too, how have we gone this far into this podcast and not mentioned Devontae Adams with
Oof.
Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard and
Yeah.
those potential corner matchups are good on good and strength on strength. And obviously, you got a young quarterback that'll be playing in this game, and Aiden O'Connell, and he's shown some bright flashes and the arm to throw the ball down the field. And if the Raiders are going to build off of just how much they feed the ball to Josh Jacobs and try to take some shots with Devontae Adams, I think you might not see that corner wide receiver matchup be consistent as far as volume throughout the game. But the shots that are there, I think, are potential big swing play opportunities. And who wins at the catch point? How
Right.
well placed are the throws? Where down the field are they? The Dolphins generally just leave their corners and say, look, we get a left corner and a right corner. And the player who ends up traveling is the nickel because the nickel plays to the passing strength no matter what. Now, Vic Fangio has some coverage specific rules that he can put into place to play extra leverage to a player as compared to playing matchups and traveling. So do you see a lot of that from the Dolphins perspective, a lot of bracketed safety and pressed up corner, even if it's away from the passing strength? Do they play some matchups with Devontae Adams? I'd be surprised if they do. But that's the one when the Raiders have the ball. Josh Jacobs is going to tote the rock.
Yeah.
And it's Devontae Adams as the counterpunch to that I think the Raiders have the chance to lull you to sleep, lull you to sleep, lull you to sleep, and then come and hit you with a big play and flip the field or potentially get points on the board.
Yeah, I mean, the last two games that the Raiders have won, Josh went for 98 yards and 116 yards, right? Those are the two best games he's had all season long. So there's going to be a heavy emphasis on Josh Jacobs. This offense does not go without the success of Josh Jacobs. Aiden O'Connell's a rookie quarterback. He's had 2 starts in a row now. He had a start earlier in the season as well that didn't go so well. But, he's going to get tested. Ramsey and Xavier Howard are ball hawks, right? You put the ball in the wrong place or, you think you see one thing and Ramsey's trying to bait you into a bad pass and you'll probably throw it, right? So it's going to see how mature Aiden O'Connell is. This is going to be huge in his maturation because not only is he trying to win this game, he's also trying to prove that he could be the starting quarterback for this team long term. As interim head coach Antonio Pierce is trying to prove that he could be the head coach of this team long term. As Bo Hardegree, the interim offensive coordinator, has proven that he could be the guy long term. As is interim GM Champ Kelly. There's a lot of interim, as you could tell,
Right.
with the Raiders right now. They're all trying to prove something. So this, again, is a huge measuring stick. That's exactly what Antonio Pierce called it earlier this week, a huge measuring stick and seeing exactly where this team is. And they've got 2 in a row. They've got this week coming up and then the Chiefs. So you'll learn a lot about yourself against those 2 teams, 2 of the best teams in the AFC. But for this one in particular, with those ball hawks at the corner positions, Xavier Howard, I've been covering him since he was at Baylor. So I know his career and his trajectory, how he's been. And Jalen Ramsey, all you got to do is say Jalen Ramsey, right? I mean, everyone knows who he is. Obviously, that was a big deal that they got him back. So Aiden O'Connell's going to get tested. Josh Jacobs is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and they're going to have to pick and choose when they can hit Devontae, Jacoby Myers, maybe even Hunter Renfrow, tight end, Michael Mayer. Maybe this is a Michael Mayer type game, but somebody's going to have to step up and make some big plays, and Aiden O'Connell's going to have to make some big boy throws at opportunities when he gets chances, or at least when he feels like he gets chances moving forward. What about kind of the offense, the outlook that you have for the Dolphins against the Raiders defense?
Yeah, I like the potential of putting that second level with the safeties and the linebackers in a bind because that's where they put so much of their passing offense is in 10 to 19, middle of the field, hitting the seams, hitting in breaking routes, in rhythm. And I just don't know. I really like the matchup in this game for the Dolphins wide receivers against the corners.
Yeah.
Marcus Peters has been a savvy vet in the league for a really long time, but he's a high variance player. Are we going to see Jack Jones getting claimed off waivers so quickly? At least Miami has experience there as far as him as a player. They played him twice already this year with New England. So they kind of have a scouting report on him as a player, as a wild card matchup for the Raiders a little bit. But I think the corner group in particular is such that the Raiders are probably going to have to give a little extra help and leverage, especially on the inside against those players. And I think that's where Miami, I do think their ability to stress your defensive back seven is going to be the test of the game. I think that's really going to be the deciding factor is how up to the task are Spillane and Trayvon Moreg and Divine Diablo and all of those guys to be able to do all the things that they have to do and also prevent explosive plays by being on time when they do throw the ball. You got to get square and you got to get ready to tackle right away.
Right, exactly. I look at that speed of the wide receivers and realize that the corners are going to get tested. We know Marcus Peters isn't a spring chicken, so he's not he's not a fast dude at this stage of the game. He's a guy that's going to try to jump a route or two and try to take the ball the other way. Then there's a lot of kind of inexperience on the other side, right? I mean, you have Jacorian Bennett, who's a 4th round pick rookie, who's still trying to find his way. Amik Robertson, I don't know if he's going to be playing or not. He's in the protocol right now. He left the game on Sunday. You've got Nate Hobbs. He'll be in the slot. He could kick outside if they need to have him. You mentioned Jack Jones. Just got a chance to finally meet him on Wednesday, and he's excited about the opportunity. But he also told me, I got to learn the playbook. I'm trying to be in the mix as quickly as possible, but I got to learn the playbook. So who knows if he's going to be there? As far as I'm concerned, he'll probably just be depth if he does play at all on Sunday. There's going to be a lot of questions, man. And there's guys that could run with wide receivers. And then there's guys that could run and make plays at the same time as wide receivers. And this is going to be a test to see if the Raiders defense could do that. I expect to see a lot of Marcus Epps helping one corner over the top. I expect to see Trayvon Merrick on the other side helping out a lot. I think there's going to be a ton of help, which might open up the middle of the field, and it could put the Raiders in a bad position because they've traditionally given up a lot over the middle of the field.
Well, we'll talk more keys to victory between the Raiders and the Dolphins as we continue this crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network with your boy Q. I'm Kyle Krabs.
So there is part 2 of our conversation. That's Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins, and myself talking all things Week 11 action, talking about the biggest matchups in this game. What are we going to be looking for while we're paying attention to the action on the screen? That's part 2. Coming up in part 3, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, we're going to talk about the path to victory and give you score predictions. What is it going to take for the Raiders to win? What is it going to take for the Dolphins to win? And how do we think it ultimately shakes out? We'll jump right into that after we tell you about Jase Medical. And it doesn't matter if you're on extended travel, you're bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered. Thanks to our partners at Jase Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Even ED generics. If you want it, they got it. Go online right now at jasemedical.com. Receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember, use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. I'm thankful for the service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half just to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply. Also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. So that was a quote right there from a verified customer. So if you or someone you love will get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember, use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. That's Locked On for $20 off your purchase. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3. Time for part 3 of the crossover edition on this crossover Thursday, November 16th, 2023. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins, and myself talking all things Week 11 action. So you've heard about the storylines. You've heard about the matchups. What is going to be the key to victory for the Raiders? What will be the key to victory for the Dolphins? What has to happen, the path to victory, and a little bit of score prediction? Let's go ahead and jump into part 3 of the conversation on the crossover edition here on the Locked On Raiders podcast.
Okay, Q. Keys to victory for this game. The Raiders win this football game what's the big one thing that's got to go right?
Well, they've got to have a dominant run game. They really do. I think that Josh Jacobs has to tote the rock anywhere between 25 and 30 times. He's got to go over 100-something yards, probably get a couple touchdowns as well. The problem with that, Kyle, that I have is if you run the ball and you run the clock, because that's what everyone's saying, just keep the ball away from the Dolphins offense. That's fine and dandy. But if you're not scoring touchdowns and you're only getting field goals, the Dolphins have a big playability. So, yeah, you might take 6 or 7 minutes off the clock and then settle for 3. Then Tua and company come back, and 3 plays later, they're in the end zone. Now, all of a sudden, all that stalling and all that trying to keep the ball away from them went for naught. So, I'm really concerned with the Raiders' consistency and their ability to consistently get in the end zone. Again, they haven't really done that throughout the course of the year. But if they are going to pull this game off, I think it's got to be a heavy dose of the run game. They've got to cash in the red zone, and the defense is going to have to come up with a turnover or two. I mean, I think it's just that simple, right? Because I don't think you're going to all day long run up and down the field on the Dolphins defense. I just don't see that happening. I know that you can run on the Dolphins somewhat, right? I get that, but I just think that you have to set your offense up in short fields a couple times, and you've got to have a lot of success in the run game with Josh Jacobs. And if you're going to turn them over, don't turn the ball over yourself, right? That's a lot to ask.
Right.
That's a lot to go right. It's almost a perfect, clean game, and it's hard because it's in South Beach, and there's an incredible home field advantage for the Dolphins. I'm expecting the Raiders are going to be in their black jerseys, as the Dolphins always have the teams wearing their home jerseys. It's going to be tough, man, but basically they've got to play a clean game and have everything go right to win this one against Miami. It's just that simple.
I think one of the big ones for Miami is can you score points in your first 2 or 3 possessions? Because I think if you do that and you find a way and you're not just held to long field goals on all 3, I think you do put the pressure on the Raiders a little bit to put points on the board. And you think about that game against the Jets, right? Where it felt like the Jets were consistently moving the ball in the first half. They get all the way down the low red zone. They have self-inflicted wounds. A touchdown comes off the board with the review of Zach Wilson stepping out of bounds. And then next thing you know, it's only 3. If Miami can find a way to get a couple touchdowns, 2 touchdowns on the board within their first 3 possessions of this football game, I think it really runs the risk of getting Las Vegas all the way out of what they want to do. So Miami's capable of scoring in bunches. I think that's a big one for Miami is start early to kind of get the game script against the Raiders' favor with how their plan is to try to win the game and force them to come at you in a way that they don't want to win. What's Colton Miller's status for this game? Is he expected to play?
That's a good question. He didn't practice on Wednesday, and I asked Coach Pierce about him, and he said, look, he thought he was going to go last week against the Jets, but we held him out. And I said, okay, so maybe he's going to practice on Wednesday, but then he didn't practice on Wednesday. So we'll see what happens. I'm expecting him to play only because Coach Pierce said that he was close. But again, he was close, and then he didn't practice on Wednesday. So he hasn't participated in a handful of practices. I know he's a guy that doesn't like to miss practice. He doesn't like to miss games. He's only missed 2 in his career, so he's been very steady. So I'm just assuming that he's going to be back. If not, Jermaine Illuminor will be back on the left side like he was against the Jets, and Thayer Munford will be at the right side. And, I think Jermaine's a decent swing tackle, but he's not Colton Miller. So that would be a huge blow to the Raiders, especially in this game against those dudes up front for Miami.
Yeah. So I think that's critical too for the Raiders is, getting their personnel. I believe Parham's also banged up. He didn't practice on Wednesday either, right?
No, he didn't. He's dealing with the calf injury, and so that that could be the whole left side of your offense or offensive line, right? Your left tackle and your left guard. That would be huge blows to the Raiders. And again, they want to run the ball. Josh Jacobs wants to run the ball, and he's starting to have success with this offensive line. So you want to keep that intact. And if those guys aren't able to go on Sunday, that's going to hurt from a protection standpoint and also trying to run the rock. So that's a couple big blows to the Raiders in their offense attack period.
Yeah. So Q, do you have a score prediction for the game as we get ready to close this thing up?
I don't have a score prediction, but I'll give one anyway. Right? Okay. I haven't given it enough thought. I struggle to see how the Raiders could continue to score as many points just because they haven't done it this year, right? I just don't know how they're going to be able to compete with a Dolphins team who's going to score. If the Jets didn't shoot themselves in the foot so many times on Sunday, they score more points. I mean, they only ended up with 4 field goals, and that was it. So they were very undisciplined, and that helped lead the Raiders to victory in this one. I feel like that the Dolphins are going to win this one. I'm going to say they're going to win 24-17 just because that 17 number is the number that the Raiders have consistently been scoring is about 17 points. They've only gone over 20 offensively once this year, and that was against the Giants. So I'm going to roll with that and just call it a day and say that if the Raiders can create a couple turnovers and have the run game clicking, then maybe they can make this a tighter game and even steal it at the end. But my gut feeling just tells me that the Dolphins are going to win it, like I said, 24-17.
Yeah, and Miami, I think, is 15-2 in their last 17 games at Hard Rock Stadium. I know you mentioned that home field advantage, so I'm
Yeah.
also picking the Dolphins to win the game, and that's a big piece of the reason why. Coming out of the bye, at
Mhm.
home, West Coast team coming east, all of those layers on top of. Really admire what Antonio Pierce has been able to get out of this football team the last 2 weeks, and it's very cool to see the interim head coach bump that this team has gotten, and the
Yeah.
inspired effort from a lot of the players. But I kind of am inclined to agree with you. I think the deck is probably stacked a little too hard, and I think you will get a spirited effort from the Raiders. I would not be surprised if you get into the final 20, 15 minutes of this football game and it's a one-score game.
Right.
My final score prediction is 27-13
Mm.
Miami as the final. But like I said, if you told me it was a touchdown game at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, before Miami, has the play late in the game when that South Florida heat kind of wears on the Raiders and busts it open a little bit, I would not be one bit surprised, just because they are playing so hard for Antonio Pierce right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I'm looking forward to, and I think that's what a lot of Raider Nation is looking forward to as well, is the effort. When they were
Yeah.
in Chicago, man, they didn't even look like they ever got off the bus. They didn't look like they got off the plane. I mean, they were lethargic. They just looked like they were uninterested in even playing the game. I don't expect to see that at all. I expect to see Antonio Pierce having those guys fired up, lathered up, coming out of the locker room, hair on fire, believing that they're going to win the game, and go out there and put everything, out there leave it on the field. That's what I expect from an Antonio Pierce led team, and that's what I think that Raider Nation is looking for. Like, can they do that? Can they go on the road, going up against a team like Miami, and give that maximum effort like every time they're on the grass? They do that, they lose the game. Of course, Raider Nation will be disappointed, but I think they'll feel like this team is trending in the right direction with the right leadership to at least have them let us, lined up to play games and play them tough.
And we will find out on Sunday at Hard Rock Stadium. The Las Vegas Raiders at 5-5 playing the 6-3 Miami Dolphins in Week 11 of the 2023 season. This has been yet another crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network. We have so many talented hosts for all of your favorite teams, so make sure when you're finished here, go find your next favorite team and seek them out as well here on the Locked On Network. I'm Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins, with your boy Q of Locked On Raiders. We hope you all enjoyed, and we hope you all enjoy the game.
So there it is. There it was. That was the crossover edition, talking all things storylines, matchups, paths to victory. You see both myself and Kyle pick the Raiders to lose this game, pick the Dolphins to win, but anything could happen, right? I mean, I think it's going to be closer than Kyle thinks. I know for a fact that, I feel like I know for a fact that Antonio Pierce is going to have these guys fired up, ready to get off the bus and really play, not like they did in the Chicago game, but we'll see. And I'll be pleasantly wrong if they do win this game. And they can. Not saying that they can't win the game, but a lot's got to go right for the Silver and Black to pull off a victory. I do think that they need to win either this week or next week, either the Dolphins or the Chiefs, just to kind of keep pace with the rest of the AFC, keep pace in the AFC West, and show that they can beat teams that are good. Right, just like, I mean, the Dolphins have this narrative right now that they can't beat teams that are above 500. Well, the Raiders aren't above 500, but that's their narrative. I'm sure that they're trying to shake that that conversation. Well, the Raiders need to all of a sudden start showing that they can beat teams that are really good. They lost to the Buffalo Bills earlier this year. Can they jump back? Can they beat the Dolphins, have a high octane offense? Can they beat the Chiefs next week? Can they beat one of these teams? Right, it's going to get tough down the stretch. We'll see what these Raiders are made of, but I do like the direction that they're going under interim head coach Antonio Pierce. Coming up tomorrow, we'll get into keys to victory. I'll break it down a little bit more in depth. We'll have more news and notes. We'll get back to calls and texts. Got plenty to get to. Had an opportunity to catch up with Jack Jones, the newest Raider, in the Raiders locker room on Wednesday. Had a good 4-minute, almost 5-minute conversation with him. If I got time on Friday's edition, I'll go ahead and bring it so you can hear that as well. Some really good stuff from the newest Raider quarterback who has a lot of familiarity with interim head coach Antonio Pierce. That's all coming up on Friday's edition as we close out the week really strong. Remember, it's week 11 already of the NFL season. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.